Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Emma Large, Head of Strategic Accounts at Amici, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm joined by Jen Zafar, our Equipment and Services Manager at Amici, and we're also pleased to welcome Richard Conry. Richard is Managing Director of INFORS HT UK. Jen, handing over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen Zafar. I am the Equipment and Services Sourcing Manager here at Amici, and my team's role is to support customers make the right decisions when they're buying equipment and really help them maximise their budgets.
Richard.
And over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for having me today. So I'm Richard Conry. I run INFORS UK. I've been working in biotech for about 12 years now, looking after the day-to-day operations of INFORS and, of course, the various customer inquiries and support requirements that come up.
Thanks both. Looking forward to getting into this topic. So today we'll be discussing a common challenge labs face, whether to buy new or secondhand equipment. Having worked in labs in the early days of my career with secondhand equipment, I'm looking forward to hearing our experts' take on today's subject. While secondhand equipment may seem like a cost-saving solution, we'll explore if there's any hidden risks or any potential impact on lab operations. We'll also share practical tips on how labs can optimize their budgets and make smarter purchasing decisions without compromising on quality or reliability. Jen, you regularly speak with scientists setting up labs and with suppliers. What are the key priorities during lab setup, and where does equipment purchasing fit in?
So yeah, absolutely. When setting up a lab, scientists will prioritise getting their operations up running quickly, efficiently, and equipment procurement or purchasing is critical because it directly impacts the productivity or the scientific output of the lab. When we see delays or poor quality equipment, it can really slow down people's research and timelines and leads to costly inefficiencies. If your equipment procurement and purchasing isn't planned properly, labs will see additional operational risks, downtime, and sometimes it means they miss these really important scientific milestones.
I mean, it makes sense that scientists prioritize operational readiness and the delivery of results. So how do labs typically approach the equipment purchasing?
That's a great question. So typically labs will consider what they want to buy, so the specifications of what they want. The next question then would be around budget and timelines. And in this budget piece, it's really important because this is where scientists will consider whether they want to kit out the lab with brand new equipment, whether they maybe think they don't have enough money and they have to go down that second-hand route, which obviously isn't always the case, or they might do a mixture of both. Interestingly, we are seeing more customers buy refurbished units, so that might come direct from the manufacturer or be ex-demo units, and that can help balance that risk between like the cost and the reliability.
And in your experience, why do labs choose secondhand equipment?
I mean, it's cost, but it's always the primary driver for startups and small labs. Budgets are really tight, and second-hand equipment pricing on the outset of it is really attractive.
And Richard, we've heard from Jen that time to operational readiness and costs are the main focus for labs when setting up. From a supplier perspective, is your experience similar? Do you find that cost is the main reason for labs choosing secondhand equipment?
Yeah, I think 100% agree with what Jen said there. Definitely cost is the biggest motivator. I think most labs look to secondhand equipment as a reduction in CAPEX spend. I think also sustainability is a factor. I think people view a secondhand purchase as a sort of environmentally responsible thing to do, extending the lifespan of equipment. Obviously, keeping something running for a longer period of time is good, and it doesn't go to waste, but it's not always quite as simple as that. So we would say, obviously, the newer models that we provide they're more energy efficient for heating and cooling, and things like CO2 consumption are reduced in newer equipment. So sort of long-term sustainability, that becomes a bit more complex to consider the actual lifespan use of something. If you're running something older for longer, but it's actually using more electricity, using more CO2, that sort of thing. And of course, the other thing that's often missed is that if you look at some of the older equipment, potentially then that's got some refrigerant gases that are more potent global warming. At some point, you're going to have to deal with that and make sure that that's disposed of properly as well. So that is something that I would say definitely needs to be considered when bringing something into the lab. And newer equipment has been tested to be more environmentally friendly. So the new Multitrons that we sell has the ACT from My Green Labs. So we know that we've got sort of defined measured energy consumption over long periods of time, and we can quantify that. So that is just you need to make sure that you really understand what you're dealing with when you talk about these things.
Thanks for sharing your perspective, Richard. There's definitely a lot in there, but I think we're all in agreement. And I suppose our experience also tells us that cost is the big driver. So let's get into that in more detail. Richard, labs are often drawn to the lower price tag of secondhand equipment, but in reality, and from your experience, how much do labs actually save by going down that secondhand route?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, really. I think it's important really to look at the total cost of getting something in and getting it up and running for what you need. So I think it can seem very cheap. You see something online, the price seems very low, but we've had a lot of occasions where we've seen people have bought a piece of secondhand equipment. They have reliability issues because it hasn't worked properly. There's sort of hidden costs in maintenance and repairs that you need to consider. And we've had there was one customer actually ended up spending double their budget on replacing parts. We have people that need to buy voltage transformers if something's been bought in from America and that wasn't necessarily made clear up front. So then obviously you have to have a step down transformer to run on UK voltage and frequency. And the other thing that happens quite commonly is that people would buy things that that doesn't have the actual requirements that they need. So something like CO2 control, for example, if we're talking about incubators, they buy an incubator, but it doesn't have CO2 control, and then they want to retrofit or something, which of course is expensive to do if it's an old piece of equipment and we're doing work that's not been done in the factory. If something's not factory fitted, there's a cost associated to that as well, and that can massively increase the price. So we would always say that you need to check that before buying.
That's really interesting from your perspective, Richard, and I think we see the same. So second-hand equipment can be 30 to 50% cheaper sometimes on auction sites, and it is really attractive, and certainly as a procurement person, like that cost and the savings is really attractive. However, when we do then think about the total cost of ownership, that's where the costs, you're right, can really pile up. And it's not uncommon to see customers spending double their budget trying to get the right item and when they are going down that second-hand route. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that one.
So albeit costs are important, and I think we're all in agreement on that one, reliability is equally, if not more important to a biotech lab. Ensuring equipment is available when needed to deliver results in a timely manner. So even if those upfront costs appear lower, and as we've said, total costs can be higher, are there risks in terms of reliability in your opinion, Jen?
Yeah, definitely. Often second-hand equipment will often lack proper quality control. It might have been stored improperly. It might have not been in use for a long time. I might have been exposed to like chemicals or environments that aren't suitable for that instrument to be in. We've had a recent example where a customer bought a second-hand piece of equipment that actually hadn't really been used, but it had been stored in a construction warehouse. So then when it got on site, although it looked fine aesthetically, when an engineer came out to calibrate it, there was rust on the inside of it and it just couldn't be calibrated. Again, had to go back to landfill basically.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very good point. Is looking at calibration and certifications as well. Obviously, if you're buying something new, you know that you've got warranties, you've got service support, you've got all the certificate of compliance to meet all the regulations. So there is a chance, of course, you buy something and you don't have any of the service documents or manuals or CE markings, that kind of thing, that you wouldn't be able to bring it into the lab in the first place anyway. So I think that's just another added risk, is if you're buying second hand, you don't have those guarantees up front, and it can be very difficult to then trace them back from some of the resellers.
Great. So it's clear that there's lots to consider from a quality and reliability perspective then. And it's likely that labs don't always have the time to do a full assessment before making a buying decision, which I guess is also an added risk. Biotech labs are very results driven, and issues with reliability will likely have an impact on operations. Jen and Richard, what are your thoughts on the impact or the impact beyond costs and quality? Have you seen lab operations and scientific progress being impacted?
Yeah, absolutely. We've all got stories of second-hand equipment going wrong. I think the worst case we've seen recently is with an Oxford spin out that bought everything second-hand for their lab, for them starting up. Within months, they had to do basically the entire setup due to repeated malfunctions, which was causing delays in their research, eventually increased overhead costs and forced them to answer really tough questions from their board and investors. So yeah, definitely it can be a big problem when it does go wrong. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Richard.
No, very true. You mentioned storage conditions on previously as well, and I think the other issue is looking at the maintenance history, and which realistically is going to be quite unknown if you're buying something secondhand. So we've done some work internally, so we know that there's a very, very strong link between regular PM visits and then reduced breakdowns throughout the life of the equipment. So if you're buying something secondhand, you don't know how it's been stored, but you also don't know how it's been treated the rest of its life. You don't know if it's had the regular PM visits. Has it had consumable parts change? Has it had calibrations done on probes, that sort of thing? So I think I like to sort of equate it to a car. That if we're talking about an incubator, the INFORS shakers, they're designed to run for very long hours, for years and years and years. They've run for. But if you bought a BMW, which could easily last 150, 200,000 miles, you would invest a lot of money in the vehicle, but you wouldn't dream of never servicing it, never changing the oil, never changing the filters, never getting it checked and regularly looked after by BMW. But of course, with secondhand units, we know, for example, from some universities that there's sort of just a buy to fail. They don't see a service. They're just bought and they just run until they die. So if you're picking something up from a reseller that's been through that life and has never had any servicing, you might suddenly then get a bit of a nasty surprise when you get it on site and it breaks, and then you've got costly repairs and things to be fixed, and obviously then downtime in your lab as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love how you've brought that example to life with your BMW car, Richard. It's clear equipment maintenance and servicing is critical to smooth lab operations, but it really doesn't get the dedicated focus, particularly in smaller businesses, and particularly when, I suppose, purchasing secondhand equipment, as we've said. Service records aren't always available, and it means then that, you know, labs aren't making that full assessment before they're making that purchasing decision. So I guess, given the risks that we've just discussed, is it ever a good idea to buy secondhand equipment? We all know that funding is tight. You know, labs are trying where they can to extend cash runway, so secondhand equipment is frequently seen as the right way forward. I'm really keen to hear both of your thoughts on this, Richard.
Yeah. I think, you know, we do understand, we're sensitive to the market. We understand that there's cost pressures everywhere at the moment, and that it is a genuine consideration for a lot of labs, particularly startups, to start looking at secondhand equipment. But I think it needs to be in the right circumstances, and I think there's some sort of specific guidelines probably that we could give that would help with that. So I'd say probably one of the easiest ways is buying secondhand refurbished equipment from the supplier. So if there's a supplier that's taking something back, you're more likely to get better guarantees and higher quality equipment from there. I think then similar things we were mentioning before, but just as a sort of a brief list, I suppose, you want to have manufacturer certifications. So is there servicing history? Is there calibration documentation? Have you got all of the sorry, I read the wrong bit then. I'm going to just pause for a second.
Okay.
So you just as a list of items that you should check, really, I suppose. Have you got all the certification from the manufacturer? Have you got the maintenance history, all the documentation of that from the work that's been done previously? And I think most importantly as well is making sure that the specification of the equipment that you're buying actually matches what you need for your process. Does it have CO2 control? Is it the right throw? Does it have all the right probes associated with it? If that's not available, that's going to cause big problems. So don't be fooled into thinking that, oh, it doesn't quite match specification, but the supplier can probably change it for us, because it could be harder to do than you think, especially if you're then trying to do something in the middle of a lab and retrofitting something, it gets a lot harder. So I think if you can make sure that you're doing those things and mitigate those problems that we mentioned, then it you know, it is potentially something that you could consider, but you just have to be quite careful, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think spending the time up front is 100% what you need to do, and make sure that the risk is going to kind of, the savings will outweigh the risk eventually.
Yeah.
So I guess it's clear that while secondhand equipment might seem like a cost-effective choice up front, there are hidden costs and operational risks, and we've talked through those today. And those risks and hidden costs will make it a more expensive choice in the long run. But for labs with limited budgets, what are the alternatives?
That's where Amici can really help. We can maximise your budgets by using our group buying power. We have experts and who will help labs get the best value for their budgets, and they won't have to compromise on the quality and reliability of what they're buying.
Yeah, and I think again, if you're working with trusted suppliers to your labs, suppliers and other people, you can make sure you get the right guidance, get the right support, and make the correct long-term purchasing decision, whatever that might be.
Brilliant. I think that's been a really interesting discussion today. Thank you both for sharing your insights. It's all we've got time for today. Do either of you have any closing remarks you want to share?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me today. I hope it sort of sheds some light on the realities of making these choices. At INFORS, we were always trying to not just provide the high quality devices and equipment, but make sure that we're building long-term partnerships with people, and I think we do that. But at the same time, if there's anything that you're not sure about, you need some advice, you've got some budget constraints, or you've got some old equipment, or you're just not sure what to do, then we're always available. You can always give me a call, drop me a message, and we'll always help where we can.
And to our audience, if you have any questions or want to learn how Amici or INFORS can support your lab operations, or how Amici works with suppliers like INFORS and others, please reach out to us. Our email address should now be showing on the screen. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you soon on our next webinar. Bye.